Welcome back. The French president says one of the priorities for this year's G7 summit is protecting the environment. Emmanuel Macron specifically pointed to the Amazon and the devastating fires that are burning up the rainforest right now. The French president says the G7 will do all it can to help the Amazon.
There is a true convergence to say that we all agreed to help as quickly as possible the countries that were affected by these fires. There were several. This morning, Colombia called out to the international community, and we must be present, and we will finalize this.
Fires are burning the Amazon in 8 countries now. Smoke fills the air, choking cities, making it very difficult to breathe. Nick Payton-Walsh reports now from Brazil.
Well, this morning, Porto Velho was woken up to a startling change in its environment from just the day before. Let our cameraman just pan around here. You can see the sun red, but literally 24 hours ago, you could see a bit more of this river, frankly, and our visibility, I would say, is down to about maximum half a mile. So we just keep panning in this direction. This is, about an hour after the sun first crept up, and the forest canopy pretty much invisible once you get away from the riverbanks. We're going to turn now over to the other side of the bridge so we can show you exactly what it's like from the other perspective. You could see this river before, and now it's basically just the barges and nothing else. This is a key city in the worst affected state by the forest fires. And I talk to you, my voice is beginning to crack up because of the content of smoke in the air. You can smell it very vividly, and it's a sign of the challenge ahead for President Bolsonaro's 43,000 troops who are on their way here. We saw some military planes landing the day before behind me over there, but the challenge is extraordinary. And it's weather patterns, it seems, really, that are causing smoke to move around. Is there wind? Is there rain? How does this cause this city to be affected like this in just one night? Now, we heard from police yesterday that some of these fires are started deliberately at night indeed. That's when they see the surge in the flames, and that adds to many who say the reason this year is so bad is because the Brazilian government has been saying to people, it's okay to deforest. You can use the Amazon as a source of riches, and that may be the reason why people are out there setting fires at night to create more farming land they can use to grow cattle. We saw that over there, to feed the cattle, creating some sense of richness in this broadly poorer part of Brazil. The question, though, is with all the global pressure on the Bolsonaro government, can the army do the job? Well, it's extraordinary that they've been putting pictures of a couple of C-130 aircraft throwing water onto the fires. The sheer volume of flames out there is quite extraordinary. The Pope has called for urgent action here, saying these are the vital lungs of the planet in his noon prayers in the Vatican this day. But whether or not that is heard in this deeply religious country, whether that changes the dial of public opinion here, which seems split between those who realise this is really what we all need to breathe. 1 in 5 of our breaths has oxygen that comes from the Amazon rainforest, but every minute, 1.5 football fields equivalent is being deforested. These are startling numbers that barely bring home the fact that this year there's 85% more fires than there were a year before. This emergency here you can smell all around you, and the question, I think, for people now is whether the Brazilian government has this by itself with its army's capabilities. Does it need outside help? And does it really at its core have the political will to deal with these not unprecedented but extremely bad fires? Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Porto Velho, Brazil.
For more on the fires in the Amazon, Tom Crowther joins us now, live via Skype from Zurich, Switzerland. He is a climate scientist and professor with ETH Zurich. Good to talk to you, Tom. Thanks very much. The G7 leaders say that they are all in agreement to help the countries affected by the Amazon as quickly as possible. What can they do?
Well, that's a really incredibly important move, because essentially many of the Northern Hemisphere's rich countries have become prosperous by using our natural resources. And now we're hoping that tropical countries are not going to use theirs in the benefit of all of us for climate change. So absolutely, it's necessary that the rest of the political world compensates those countries for all of for preserving and protecting those forests. They could, local people can make a lot of money from just clearing that forest and using it for livelihood, and they can make their own livelihoods. And so we need to be able to compensate those countries for their losses, which benefits all of us in the long run.
The French President Emmanuel Macron says that the objective must be reforestation. But as we've been talking about, that doesn't really fit with Brazil's president's plan. He has said and continues to say that the Amazon is open for business. So what do you do?
Yeah, it's an incredibly worrying situation because, of course, globally, as a global community, we need global scale restoration. We need to restore forests across the globe to help to offset climate change. But restoration necessarily means that we need to conserve what we already have. And if we're going to be losing old growth forest at the same rate that we're gaining new young forests, we're having a net loss. So it's absolutely a top priority right now to save those existing forests. I think political pressure can be incredibly important. And also every single one of us can play a role because there are many small projects and NGOs and restoration companies all across the tropics that are doing incredible work. And it's easy to find them and simply donate funds because they are urgently in need of that funding so that they can do really responsible and sustainable restoration. So we can all do our part very easily.
Let's talk about the role of climate change versus the role of deforestation. What do you think deserves more of the blame here, and what impact does the warming of the climate, the warming of the planet, have to do with these fires?
So it's worth noting that fires are natural. They're a natural part of the cycle, and particularly in this dry season, they're very prevalent. But of course, as we drive climate change, those conditions are getting warmer and drier, particularly in those wet tropics. And this is obviously going to increase the prevalence of fires. But the real spike that we've seen this year seemed to be associated with the change in political movement, as it is becoming increasingly easy for farmers and landowners to remove existing forests to use it for cattle grazing. So it's a combination, it certainly is a combination of political decisions and ongoing climate change. And ultimately, it all comes together to feed the same focus. We need political action so that we can stop this deforestation, which contributes to climate change, and it'll stop the resulting fires and the feedbacks that can take place.
What kind of advice would you have, Tom, for viewers who are concerned about the environmental impact that they and their families have? What can they do to reduce the burden that they may be placing on the environment?
So, of course, we've all got our role to play. It's every single one of us is responsible for climate change. And so everything we can do to minimize our emissions is the highest priority. But of course, once we've done that, it's also really, really valuable. And there's some really tangible ways to get involved by drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. And ecosystem restoration is our best solution to do that. There are thousands of projects out there around the world right now restoring forests, but also restoring peatlands and wetlands and grasslands that can draw in a huge amount of carbon. And they are all urgently in need of funding. So every single one of us can, with a click of a button, donate and really have a tangible impact.
Climate
we can also do.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please.
Well, I'd say political pressure is the other thing. Really be mindful of the way we vote, not just for our political parties, but also the way we spend our money. That's another way of voting. And if we can promote companies and organizations that are environmentally friendly and have a positive impact, it can be really powerful.
Thank you, Tom. Tom Crowther is a climate scientist. He's also a professor with ETH Zurich, joining us via Skype today. An important story, Tom. Thanks very much. And CNN also has some tips for you. You can go to CNN.com and you can learn what you can do right now to help the Amazon.